What's going on, everybody? Got a little reactions here to the free agency. This is, the illegal tampering period, so a lot of stuff to react to. Also some stuff over the weekend, some trades to react to as well. This is going to be a bit of a video extension of the Fully Inflated Football podcast that many of you follow. A reminder, you can catch that here on YouTube periodically, and then also on Spotify you can find it, and then I'm trying to get it up on all of the services, iTunes, you name it. Still a bit of a work in progress there, but that is still the goal when, maybe after the draft, when I have a little time to figure out how to get that to work. But I appreciate all of you guys who have supported the podcast to this point, and this is just going to be an extension of that, and this is something I plan on doing more moving forward. I've got a nice new setup here, new PC. I'm ready to kind of do these video series or reactions a little more often now. So looking forward to that. And then just real quick housekeeping. I know you want to hear my reactions to this stuff. I'll get right there. But for those that have been asking, there have been a lot of you about my Madden roster. Announced the overhaul is coming. So I am getting closer on that. I plan on finishing offense up tonight. I set a personal ETA of 314, the new league year for that. That is still my goal. We'll see, a lot to get done still, but I'm headed to Mexico this weekend on Saturday, so if not by the 14th, I plan on having it up by the time I leave, along with a pre-post-season version of the roster without transactions. Some of you want that, and then along with as well some updates to my 5 draft classes as well to mesh now with the new ratings overhaul that includes differently rated quarterbacks as well as nerfed jumping for defensive players to kind of fix some of the Madden gameplay stuff. But this isn't just a Madden channel. We talk about NFL stuff as well. So let's get into it here. We got tons of stuff to react to. Not going to waste any more time. So let's start with something that kind of popped up over the weekend and has continued to develop, and that is just this story of the Oakland Raiders and what's going on there in Oakland. It started with the Antonio Brown trade, so let's just jump into that. And I know what a lot of people have said, that, well, they said they couldn't pay Khalil Mack. Here they are paying Antonio Brown and now Trent Brown. I get it. Like, it's hard to justify that, but this is a philosophy, and I have been as hard as anyone on John Gruden. I don't think he did a very good job as general manager, but the point I'm trying to get to here is that Mike Mayock is actually doing a pretty good job here in just his first months here in Oakland. So, I get it. You traded away Khalil Mack and said you can't pay him, which I've said was the worst trade in the NFL in my lifetime. You basically give him away for a first-round pick, a can of peanuts, whatever you want to call it, and then you go and spend that money, or you had already used that money on Jordy Nelson and Tahir Whitehead. Like, really bad managing of the team by John Gruden, and in hindsight, you would rather have Khalil Mack than what they've done to this point. But the first rule in the game of holes, and believe it, the Oakland Raiders are playing the game of holes, trying to dig out of a hole. This is a big philosophy of mine, whether it's in life or in football management. The first rule of the game of holes: stop digging. And that is exactly what the Oakland Raiders are doing. Yes, they screwed up with Khalil Mack. There is no doubt about that. But you bring in Antonio Brown for a third-round pick. It's closer to a second-round pick, but you're not giving up a top 50 pick, which in general, that's where you're going to get your instant studs and potential stars out there. And you're not giving up these future investments. So you're going to have 4 picks in the first 36 to build for the future, which has been the plan here. But a lot of people are upset because, or not upset, but critiquing the move because Antonio Brown won't be there or be in his prime when the Raiders are ready to win. No, but Antonio Brown is the type of piece, an elite wide receiver. If he's not the best wide receiver in the NFL, he's certainly, one of the 5 best. So you bring him in, and he is going to help Derek Carr. He's going to take some pressure off the run game. And yeah, he might not be there when they're ready to actually win, but he's going to do everything in his power. I get that he has issues as a diva, but look at what the Steelers have done, helping to develop some of the receivers behind Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Emmanuel Sanders. you know, he is going to help take the load off of everyone in that offense. He's going to help Derek Carr become the quarterback that hopefully he has the potential to be in 4 years when the Raiders are ready to win. Hopefully take some pressure off of the other receivers here. If they bring in another young offensive player, he won't collect as much attention. You know, we've seen like Corey Davis in Tennessee really struggled because he's been the #1 target since he got there. It's going to be the opposite for whoever they come in, whoever they bring in to be that guy in Oakland. So he's going to help get them to where they want to be, and you don't give up a bunch of capital to do it. Yeah, you give up cap space, but they've got enough cap space in Oakland to fill the Federal Reserve in San Francisco. So that's not really an issue for this specific team. You know, the other teams that were rumored, they actually need that cap space, so you can see why they didn't make that move. But for Oakland, great deal. And then they bring in Trent Brown, and we're going to talk a little bit more about just the tackle market in general. It's a move you had to make. I've been very critical of Colton Miller. Raiders fans have defended him back to when I mocked Jonah Williams to Oakland in the first round top 5 pick. You know, I'm not mocking that anymore, but they were all saying Colton Miller is our guy. Why would we take a tackle? Well, clearly Oakland feels they needed a left tackle, and Colton Miller now can move to right tackle, hopefully become I don't think he's ever going to be an elite guy. He's got the tools. I think best case he becomes like a Nate Solder. Trent Brown kind of is what he is at this point. He's a starting caliber tackle for sure. But you know, did they overpay for him? Look, he's not worth $15 million as a player at left tackle. But you factor in the opportunity cost and who you'd probably be playing at tackle if you don't pay Trent Brown. That's when he becomes worth that money. So I approve of that move as well. You're building up this situation where you're going to have a functional offense. And I've said John Gruden's a bad general manager. I don't necessarily think he's a bad coach. So I do like the moves they've made. Now, they trade away Kaleki Asemele. And he is probably overpaid at this point. He's certainly regressed from being that, arguably the best guard in the NFL, just a true mauler for when he was back with the Ravens. He's probably not that anymore. But to make that move, you probably have to use all of your cap space for that to be worth it. They literally just gave him away to the Jets just to clear cap space. So we'll see what they do with that cap space this year. Personally, I would have just kept Asemele and had that offensive line be even better. But I do like the direction the Oakland Raiders are taking. I think you got to take your hats off and just, commend them a little bit because we have been very hard on that front office. It does seem like Mike Mayock has a grasp on what he's doing. I think everything he's done at this point has made sense. And now John Gruden can kind of just be a scout, be a coach, and not have to worry about kind of the understanding of positional value and stuff that clearly Mike Mayock has a pretty good grasp on to this point. So the next thing, moving on, we're going to break down kind of the big signings as we go here. So Landon Collins is going to go from one NFC East team to the next for a big deal, bigger than I expected. The Washington Redskins, about $15 million a year, maybe even 16. It was a lot of money for a guy that is not a perfect player. He certainly has his flaws. He's not a true, center fielding safety type. He is going to play in the nickel, that slot corner, bandit linebacker, strong safety type, obviously. And he has great acceleration, short area quickness, great ball skills. He can house anything. He's got great ability after the catch. It's a lot of money for him, and his coverage might be a liability at times, but I don't know if liability is the right word, but when we're talking about $15 million, probably not worth that. But the one thing I will say about Landon Collins is he is the perfect fit here in Washington, who I've said going back to before the season started that this is one of the most underrated defenses in the NFL, and they certainly proved that this season. Granted, they had a lot of injuries, but this team has an identity, and they've re-upped it by bringing in Case Keenum. They want to play tough nose defense, attack the football, make you feel them the day after the game. This is probably the meanest defense in the NFL. It's not a perfect defense. They're going to have their hiccup days and days where their aggressive style is not going to pay off. But Landon Collins is not just another Alabama player. And I made a joke about how we've been asking for Washington to change their team name from the Redskins for years. Well, how about just make them the DC Crimson Tide? Because Landon Collins is going to be there now as like the 6th Bama player on that defense. Reuben Foster looking like a good pickup. You got the 2 D tackles up front. Perhaps not Tim Williams, the other edge guy from Bama might step in now that Preston Smith might be gone there in Washington, and then maybe how Clinton Dix comes back. We'll see there. That is one other point that we'll talk about in just a second. But, I do think that Landon Collins is a great fit. They paid a lot, but frankly, if this team is going to be a playoff team next year, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities with Case Keenum, who can protect the ball, they'll run the ball, they'll get Darius Geis back, they have a great offensive line. If they can just stay healthy for once, this Washington team, there really is no reason that they can't win close games, beat the bad teams, win 10 games, sneak into the playoffs as a wild card, and be kind of a nasty opponent that probably doesn't win a playoff game but could certainly get in. And I think Landon Collins could be a big piece of that. The other point I was going to make is that about 4 months ago, we were saying that between Clinton Dix and DJ Swearinger, they got the best safety duo in the NFL. I didn't go that far because I said that those are both, stud players but not blue chip players. And it just goes to show you that, if you're not talking about a blue chip player, a true superstar, well, there's really not a huge gap between your regular starter and the stud players like a Clinton Dix or DJ Swearinger. Both those players are gone now. Not to say they're bad players by any means, but I do think a lot of times we like to overhype players that might not deserve it, and I'm not going to go deep into that because that's just kind of a tangent. But next off, let's stick on the topic of tangents here, because on Twitter I had just a flood of activity around Nick Foles signing with the Jacksonville Jaguars, a 4-year deal, $88 million. This absolutely blew my mind, and I have, needless to say, been a little critical of the Jaguars and their ability to evaluate this quarterback situation. You can go back to before last season started. I caught a lot of criticism for saying that the Jaguars to miss the playoffs last season was my lock of the season, my bet your house lock, because bringing Blake Bortles back after fooling everyone thinking he can play quarterback in this league, that they were not going to be able to compete with a healthy Andrew Luck and getting Deshaun Watson back. They were not going to be able to compete in that division, and it proved true. Now, they bring in Nick Foles to have some sort of consistency in this room. The rumor is they overpaid him because having a big contract allows the locker room to buy into him as a leader. What is that? Is that a real thing? Like, are you kidding me? Teams are going to buy into winning and having a good quarterback. I don't think people really care if Blake Bortles or if Nick Foles is making $22 million or $10 million. They just see the player on the field. I kind of get the sentiment, but to overpay him like this is crazy. To pay him when they did, they basically, just think about this for a second. This is why I'm so critical of this move. The Eagles, going back to after they won the Super Bowl, were shopping Nick Foles. That's over a year ago. Nobody wanted him. And that was for a cheap 2-year deal. And when you fast forward to this year, a 1-year deal. Because he was still on the market up until like 3 weeks ago when the Eagles lost the ability to trade him. Or actually, they still did if they tagged him. But you get the point. Nobody wants Nick Foles, except for apparently the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we knew 2 weeks ago at the Combine that you were going to sign him. Nobody stepped in and called them and called Nick Foles and was like, wait, don't sign with Jacksonville. We'll give you more. No one was doing that. Like, what team in the NFL wanted Nick Foles? The Dolphins? I don't think so. There's no teams that need a starting quarterback, at least of Nick Foles' caliber. So to pay him before the new league year even starts and just jump in there and be like, here's almost $100 million, $51 million guaranteed. You just buy yourself a 2 to a 4-year deal to quarterback purgatory when you didn't have to. You could have sat there and just called their bluff. I don't know what the agent was doing. Really good job by Nick Foles' agent, but what happens if you wait a week and no one's signed Nick Foles to a 4-year contract? You can then come back and say, we respect you. we've cleared up some of these starters. We've cleared up some cap space. We are willing to bring you in as our starter next year for a 1-year, $20 million contract, a 1-year, $15 million contract. That's good business. But the Jacksonville Jaguars just don't understand what they're doing with this quarterback situation. Even if they lost Nick Foles, is that really the end of the world? Trade a second or a first round pick for Josh Rosen. Sign Tyrod Taylor. There's so many other options. I just don't understand this. They're going to win 7 or 8 games next year. And in 3 or 4 years, we're going to look back on this as such a meh move. It just doesn't make any sense to me. They literally just bought a ticket into quarterback purgatory, and I think it's just blasphemous how much money they gave him. But good for you, Nick Foles. You're a fine player. You're probably the 33rd best quarterback in the NFL. Good for you for getting your money. You seem like a great dude, so congratulations on this contract. But from a front office perspective, I just do not understand this for Jacksonville. I could see this backfiring pretty quickly if the players are like, wait, we want to win a Super Bowl, and that was your option to replace Blake Bortles? Like, Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, is it really that big a difference? Probably not. Anyway, let's move on. I clearly not a big fan of that signing. But then we got the Browns trading Kevin Zeidler to the New York Giants for Olivier Vernon. And I was pretty loud about this one on Twitter as well. I thought the Giants, just a steal. They didn't want Vernon anymore. He was too expensive. He had a good year last year. He did get injured. To me, Vernon is a fine player. He's a high-end number 2 edge rusher. I don't believe that he fits the profile of the number 1 guy in terms of consistently being that edge guy who can get after the quarterback. He is a little overpaid in that regard. So the Giants get rid of him, and they bring in Kevin Zeidler to boost up that offensive line, which is fantastic. Zeidler was the best guard in the NFL last year. For Cleveland, I thought this was a very high-risk, low-reward move. Now, the risk is that Austin Corbett, who was a second-round pick last year, a guard out of Nevada, they have another Nevada guard. I just said Nevada and then Nevada. Joel Bitonio, also out of Nevada. Should I say Nevada or Nevada? I don't know. I think they both work. But Bitonio really developed well. He's a really nice player. They're hoping that Austin Corbett could be another Bitonio. Now, they tried him at left tackle. He didn't really work out, so he didn't have the ability to play there. They've seen him in camp, so they know what they have in him, but that's still a pretty big risk to give away Kevin Zeidler, who was an absolute rock. The biggest reason for me that Baker Mayfield was able to really thrive. Baker Mayfield is very impressive, and he did a lot of things on his own as well, so I don't want to take away from him. But to have the best, arguably the best offensive line in the NFL last year. They had some questions at left tackle, but from left guard to right tackle, they were just a rock all year long. So you're now just going to give up probably your best offensive player for an edge rusher who is an upgrade to Emmanuel Ogbah, and I've been saying that the Browns need to address that position all year, all off season. But to give away your best offensive player probably outside of Baker Mayfield, to do that when there are other options. You could go pay Justin Houston for a year. You can draft a guy in the first round. There's other ways to get that edge player. I don't know how they're going to replace Kevin Zeidler unless it can be Austin Corbett, but that's a pretty big risk. So, Dorsey's proved me wrong in the past with Baker, and he might prove me wrong again here, but this to me was not worth the risk of giving away probably your best offensive player. But for the Giants, great move. Now go get a freaking quarterback, because you are starting to build quite a good offensive core here in New York. You've got 2 great guards, Will Hernandez and now Zeidler. You've got Nate Solder there at left tackle. Center and right tackle still huge question marks, but you go get a quarterback, whether it's trading up into the back of the first, like I said, to get Drew Lock, or trading a second for Josh Rosen if that's really all it's going to take, or draft Dwayne Haskins. Do something, because the Giants fans will defend Eli Manning there. I tweeted this out. So, shameless plug, follow me at TFG_football. But Giants fans can sit there and say, we back Eli Manning, he's underrated, it's the offensive line's fault, it's the play calling's fault. They can say all that stuff, but the reality is the fans and the GMs and the coaches of all 31 teams in the league that aren't the New York Giants are sitting there laughing like, we'll take another year of Eli. Sure, works for us. Like, the rest of the NFL is just waiting on the Giants to get themselves out of this hole. They're doing the opposite of what the Raiders are. They keep digging into this Eli hole. Just have a nice retirement ceremony, send him off, and say thanks for a great career. It's time. So let's move on. The Lions making moves. The second year of Matt Patricia trying to, we all, almost said it jokingly that Matt Patricia was going to, try to have the Bill Belichick scheme in here. Now, ideally, they would have the same kind of roster construction philosophy in that they're not going to overpay for free agents. They haven't reached that point of comfort yet in their organization, and I don't know if Patricia is going to have the systematic understanding of how to do that, because these are not Belichickian moves. Paying a lot for a pass rusher, paying a lot for a slot corner, but these are Belichickian players coming from that same system. Well, Coleman used to be a Patriot like a couple of years ago, and now he's been killing it in Seattle. That said, I think these are great moves for Detroit. I think that this offense, frankly, it kind of is what it is. Like, maybe they need they do have a new coordinator in there to spice things up, but you got Stafford, who's a pretty solid quarterback. You got Kenny Golladay. The offensive line should be okay. Like, I don't think this team's going to get carried by its offense, but they can be a solid offense. So with Patricia as a defensive coach, I like the idea of these big signings of Trey Flowers and Justin Coleman. The Lions defense, in theory, should be pretty damn good next year. You have Darius Slay, who I would say is a top 3 corner in the NFL with Jalen Ramsey and Patrick Peterson. You now have an upgrade to Ezekiel Ansah. Maybe you could even bring Ansah back to be that complementary piece to Trey Flowers. You have a really strong interior defensive line. 3 guys that I really like there. You got 2 young linebackers that you're hoping to develop. I'm thinking of Miami. They just have Gerard Davis. But, I think Detroit's making the right moves here. They could still use a safety, but you really do have the pieces now to have a top 15 defense with Matt Patricia, and I think Detroit is going to compete in the NFC North and be about an 8 to 10 win team. So these moves are definitely necessary steps towards that. And then we've got the 49ers signing Quan Alexander, which I was stunned by the reaction on Twitter for this. Yes, Quan Alexander's had his ups and downs. Yes, he's coming off an injury. Yes, his PFF grade stinks. Personally, I'm a PFF guy. I work for PFF. Personally, I think a lot of linebackers like C.J. Mosley, like Quan Alexander, who are asked to do a lot in coverage, who aren't just Blake Martinez guys who are just cleaning up the trash behind a great D-line, or after they get beat, they might get a good grade for the tackle they made. That's not Quan Alexander. He flies around the field. Yes, he takes risks, and sometimes he's going to grade out poor for those risks. But he is a difference-making linebacker. I thought he was definitely the most underrated linebacker, free agent in general in this entire free agent class, and certainly was, a top 10 free agent for me. So I was not surprised at all that he was one of the first names to get signed. So the 49ers, who I will applaud as being one of the best front offices in the NFL with John Lynch, are going to give him a big contract to come in here to fill that void left by Reuben Foster, who they cut, pair him with Fred Warner. And the 49ers, to me, I've been saying for 3 months now, or at least since the season ended, that they are my bet right now in terms of value on the Vegas market to win the Super Bowl. I got them at 45 to 1. I've got my bets down already. I think they're up to 30 to 1 now, and they're just going to keep going up and up. Especially because I think Jimmy Garoppolo is still just being slept on. The big criticism here about Quan was that they overpaid. Well, to me, the linebacker position is already systematically underpaid. I think it's the most underrated position in the NFL. You look at the best defenses in the last 7 years since it's become a passing league. Middle linebacker is the most, not the most, but it is, to me, just as valuable as edge and just as valuable as corner. You're going to stop the run. You're going to cover all of the annoying things that offenses have done to make things easier on the quarterback. This is why Dallas was so good last year. This is what makes Jacksonville, Seattle, Carolina so great, is that slants, RPOs, read options, bubble screens, running in general is so much harder when you've got linebackers that are instinctive and fly to the football. I don't care if Quan Alexander misses a few tackles now and then. I just don't. I don't care if he gambles and gets beat a couple times a game, as long as he can make plays 2 or 3 times to complement that. I'd much rather have that than a Blake Martinez or a Preston Brown who's just standing there waiting till the ball comes to you. So I think Quan Alexander is a fantastic signing for the 49ers, just going to make that defense better, a defense that, if they can get Nick Bosa in the draft, which I think is fairly likely, is going to be very underrated next year. I think that D-line could be fantastic. And then just the secondary is going to benefit from that. And now Quan Alexander underneath in coverage is going to be great. So great move for the 49ers. Tyrann Mathieu is going to sign with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I'm a huge Tyrann Mathieu guy. Personally, I thought that it was a crime that Houston got him for like a 1-year, $7 million deal. The safety market last year was mind-numbing. How little these guys got paid. Well, it's self-corrected. So the Chiefs now going to pay Tyrann Mathieu. I believe it was about 12 to 13 mil. Yeah, it was a 3-year, $42 million contract. Now, he's a fantastic player. He's more like Landon Collins to me. He's better in coverage, certainly. He is that slot corner, strong safety type. I think a lot of people, kind of think in terms of Madden that he's like listed as a safety, and you think of him as like a free safety type. That's not what Tyrann Mathieu is. It's not who he is. He played, I think, less than 30% of his snaps as a safety, a free safety. All the other snaps he's playing as a slot corner, a linebacker, a strong safety, a box safety. That's who he is. And he's going to help, defend a lot of those things I was just describing with Quan Alexander, the things that teams do to make offense easier. That's what Tyrann Mathieu is going to take away. It's a great place to start for the Chiefs. The one thing I'll say is that's a lot to pay him when you've got a lot of other problems. You're shopping D Ford. Justin Houston's no longer on the team. Who knows what's going on with Eric Berry? You still need help at corner. So they still have work to do, and I think Tyrann Mathieu can be a big step towards making this defense serviceable, which is all it really needs to be. And taking away that easy stuff is a great step towards that. But if that's going to hinder you from adding 3 starters in that defense as opposed to just the one, then I don't love the move. So we'll see how it plays out. Only time will tell with that. I think Matthew's an excellent player and is a big need for the Chiefs. The other interesting thing is that going to push Kendall Fuller more outside? Because he's, to this point in his career, mostly been a slot corner. Well, Tyrann Mathieu's going to do a lot of that stuff in the slot. So is that going to push Kendall Fuller maybe outside, which historically has actually worked decently well with slot corners moving to outside corner. Sometimes a bit of a hole in the market there. A lot of coaches kind of stubborn about playing those guys in the slot, but then when they step outside, they actually play pretty well. Casey Hayward comes to mind there. Nico Roby-Coleman always actually grades out very well on the outside, even though he's thought of as a slot corner. Some other guys on that list as well. So we'll see. I think it's a great move, a good move that could be great if they can still put some good pieces around him in that secondary, because they do still have a lot of holes, depending what happens with Eric Berry. So then the Jets, they're going to sign Jameson Crowder. Good move. The free agent market at wide receiver was almost non-existent. It was basically just slot guys and Devin Funchess, who did get signed by the Colts. We'll talk about that in a second. Good move for the Jets. They get Kaleki Asemele, which was a great move by them, by the way, to go get him, because they've got cap space out the wazoo. So you got a starting left guard now. That offensive line definitely needs even more help, but that's a good step. You get another weapon there. I think, the Jets, a particular reason this is a great move for them is they don't have a second-round pick, and they pick in the top 5, which they're not going to go receiver there unless they trade down and collect picks. So where the receivers in this draft are going to go is late first through the second round into the early third. So maybe you get one in that early third, because there really are about 10 receivers in this class that I think can start right away. I don't know if they were going to get one of those in the draft, depending how it all plays out. So you get your slot guy. You now have a full starting unit of wide receivers with Jameson Crowder. You got Quincy Enunwa and Robbie Anderson. Versatile skill sets there. I also like their tight end, Christopher Herndon. Maybe you bring in, Le'Veon Bell, I think, or a Darrell Williams. I think they do need to add one more weapon, but I really like what they're doing, trying to build around Sam Darnold. They're kind of competing with Buffalo and Arizona, I think, to try and beef up those cores. So just a good move for them. Pretty sizable contract for a guy that does have injury questions. But again, money is kind of meaningless for them. They just need players. Then I want to talk about these tackles and the tackle market. We already talked a little bit about Trent Brown. But two players a little bit under the radar that got big contracts, Donovan Smith and Bobby Hart. Donovan Smith, left tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Bobby Hart, a right tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals. Little background, Donovan Smith, I believe a second-round pick out of Penn State. His rookie contract had just ended. He had been basically a bottom-tier starting tackle and still has been. He's a better pass protector than a run blocker. We've seen the struggles in the run game there in Tampa Bay. But he has settled in at least as a solid blindside protector. Certainly starting caliber, but they paid him, what was it, $14 million a year. That's a ton, certainly more than he's worth as a player himself. And then Bobby Hart, who didn't even start every game at right tackle for Cincinnati, but did settle in there. That's been just a rotation at tackle for them. But between the two guys that they invested in and then letting Whitworth go, they've had such a problem filling those tackle positions. They did trade for Cordy Glenn, who stuck there at left tackle. But right tackle, they finally got someone to just exist and not get beat constantly, and that was Bobby Hart. Now, he's not a very good player. He's probably about the 66th best tackle in the NFL, but he got a 3-year, $21 million contract, probably pretty front-loaded. I didn't look at the deal. I would assume it's more of a 1-year deal with, the ability to continue to grow and play on that contract. But again, this is the opportunity cost to get these guys. These are not star players. These are not stud players. These are, for a tackle, replacement level starters. The difference is, at offensive tackle, the replacement level is very hard to find, if that makes sense. At a running back position, you can lose, say, Jamal Williams, who's a replacement level starter, Alex Collins, a replacement level starter, and you can go and get a Mike Davis in free agency or Alfred Morris or whatever. The replacement level at running back is large and far and wide. Tackle, there's a huge drop off between 70 tackles and whoever Joe Schmo is filling in behind him. You just want a guy that's not getting beat every play. And that is the opportunity cost to pay these offensive linemen. I've been saying it going back to last offseason that tackle, considering the fact that you need 2 starters, has become a harder position to find a starting caliber player than quarterback. Star at the position, to find a star at the player, it's a star at the position. It's still harder for a quarterback, but to find if you just need a tackle, it's a little harder actually, I think, to find a starting caliber tackle than a quarterback. I mean, look at the Jags. They brought in Nick Foles. Can't necessarily say the same thing about the Bengals. They're overpaying Bobby Hart, who may not actually be a starting caliber tackle. So I just think it's interesting. Offensive line in general is just, it continues to be such a demand for everyone, and the supply just isn't there. We got a few more moves to talk about here. We're getting towards the end of this. Deshaun Jackson, the Philadelphia Eagles, making moves. Love this move. I tweeted out that the Philadelphia Eagles are one of 5 front offices that just know what the hell they're doing, and everyone else is just throwing darts. So they're going to bring in Deshaun Jackson, a guy they're familiar with. Granted, it's a new regime, but they know what they're getting here. They're getting a deep threat. Trading late round picks for starting caliber veterans continues to be just the most underrated way to build a roster. The Eagles have been doing this for several years now, and it has paid dividends for them. We've seen the Rams have success with this. it's just a great way to get a quality player without giving much up. They're usually on the back end of their contracts. The other team usually takes all the guarantees, so if they stink, you can just cut them. Great move. And now you have a versatile set of wide receivers. You got Zach Ertz to be that elite slot receiver type. You've got, I mean, Aguilar's probably gone, but you've got Alshon Jeffrey, who is just a great jump ball guy, a physical guy who can block and be that big receiver. Deshaun Jackson, who can take the top off. Him paired now with Carson Wentz, who has never had a deep threat the caliber of Deshaun Jackson. Great. And then Dallas Goedert's a really nice player as well. So they are really loading up. I saw they also brought, not Donald Penn, Jason Peters back, who did start to kind of become healthy again. We'll see at his age if he can be that high caliber tackle, but Philly, I think, is going to, come back. Wentz is going to be on a bit of a revenge tour because there's still people out there that don't think he's an elite quarterback. I don't know how you could watch his tape from a year ago and just think he's a replaceable quarterback who you should just bring in Nick Foles instead. So the Eagles just making moves. Howie Roseman, just fantastic general manager. And then Malik Jackson actually next on my list, another signing for the Eagles. I don't love it. I'm not going to question I'm not going to question Howie Roseman, who clearly knows what he's doing. I would expect that they're hoping to get the role that they kind of failed on with Michael Bennett. They went and traded for Michael Bennett to be that interior rusher on third down and to help their run defense. I believe Timmy Jernigan is not going to be back either. So Malik Jackson should start here. He's a really solid number 2 guy next to Fletcher Cox. So $10 million a year for 3 years for him, a little steep for me, but I get it. I wouldn't say it's a great move. I wouldn't say it's a bad move. It's a good move for what they're looking for. And then we got Adam Humphries to the Tennessee Titans, a 4-year, $36 million contract. So that's what, $9 million a year? Pretty solid deal. These slot receiver types are definitely going to be on the higher end of replacement level. But Adam Humphries is a pretty versatile player in the slot. You're not going to put him outside, but he actually runs really good routes deep over the middle. And I trust him going deep over the middle. And his catch and run ability isn't exactly what you desire for a slot guy, but he's very reliable. Tennessee needs someone, just anyone, for other defenses to pay attention to. So that's going to be this guy. So pretty much a signing by necessity for Tennessee, who just needed someone steady. And then Terrell Suggs is going to head to the Arizona Cardinals. Went to college in Arizona. Good move. I do kind of have to take back something I said on Twitter that, I've been doing these translation tweets where I quote the tweet of where he signed and then I translate it into its impact on something else. So I said, Terrell Suggs signs with Arizona. Translation, Nick Bosa is a 49er. Noting that the Cardinals are set at edge. Kind of an oversight on my end. Terrell Suggs is 37 years old. So probably not going to, seal it for them. And he would be a great mentor for Nick Bosa. Now, I've been saying since January that Kyler Murray is going to be an Arizona Cardinal. I still think they are and should go do that. But it does not necessarily write off them taking Nick Bosa, which is still in the cards, pun intended. The last piece here, and I'm sorry if something broke while I was recording this. I almost said Dante Moncrief. But Devin Funchess signs for a 1-year, $13 million contract with the Indianapolis Colts. My translation tweet on this was, we miss Dante Moncrief, who got a 1-year, $8 million contract last year. So, they want that big-bodied wide receiver. They've got T.Y. Hilton. They had success kind of converting a receiver in Eric Ebron, who struggled in Detroit, kind of rejuvenating his career. So they're hoping that they can get that in Devin Funchess. I think he's a solid player, solid hands, surprising, like sneaky fast for a bigger dude. Wouldn't surprise me if he caught 7 to 9 touchdowns next year and earned himself a decent payday. It's certainly an upgrade from what they had in Indianapolis, and it's not like a 1-year deal for $13 million is going to ruin this team. They have over $100 million in cap space, so I actually think it's a good move just to add another body in there without, jeopardizing anything long term. They're obviously not going to spend all $100 million of their cap space this year, so the $13 million doesn't really matter. You're just paying for a body basically for a year, a rental, if you will, unless he works out, which is great because his upside's pretty good. So those are my full reactions. I don't even know how long this went. But again, this is kind of a video podcast format here. So tomorrow, I don't know if I'm going to do this again. We'll see how the reaction is to this. But we're going to have some more news tomorrow. There's still a ton of great players. I do want to note kind of 6 players here that are going to hit the market tomorrow or are on the market that could sign tomorrow and kind of predict where I could see them going. And I'm doing this on the fly. So Earl Thomas, surprised he didn't sign already, honestly. I think he might actually be pumping the brakes after seeing these big safety deals because he originally said 2 years, $30 million. Well, he might want more than that now. He might want a 4-year, $60 million contract based on, what Landon Collins got. So we'll see. I think if he is willing to do that 2-year, $30 million contract, I'm not trying to be a homer here, but Green Bay, it would be a no-brainer for them to bring in Earl Thomas for 2 years. You're not going to really ruin your future. It's a high-risk play. They desperately need that. Dallas would make sense if he's willing to take less. I don't think Dallas is in a position to give him 13, 14 mil, but if they could get him for 10 or 11, I would do it if I was Dallas. If you can make it work in terms of the cap. That might be the end of Ezekiel Elliott if you do sign Earl Thomas, but I don't know if that's the worst thing. That's a different take that I will save for another day. And the 49ers is another team. You got Richard Sherman there. You've got the Seattle scheme that Earl Thomas is going to dominate in. And then another sneaky team would be the Jacksonville Jaguars if they can make it work financially. We know that they want that role filled. Basically, anyone that runs that Seattle scheme is going to value Earl Thomas a little more than anyone else. And then we got Justin Houston. Older edge rusher, still I think has another year or two in the tank. When healthy, I think he's still a low-end number 1 edge rusher. He showed flashes last year of dominance and flashes of being an aged veteran player. So, I think anyone looking for an edge, you got Indianapolis, Green Bay would be fits, even the 49ers could be a fit there. The Jets, I could see Justin Houston. Then we got C.J. Mosley. This reminds me a little bit of when Fitzpatrick, or who's the Dante Hightower, not Fitzpatrick, hit the market for New England, where he didn't quite get the money on day one and then came back a couple days later. Kind of reminds me of that for Baltimore. I know Baltimore would love to have C.J. Mosley back, and they haven't really splashed yet as far as I can remember, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were able to bring C.J. Mosley back. Outside of that, your guess is as good as mine. I think inside the division, the Steelers, the Bengals would be 2 teams that would definitely love to take him away from Baltimore, so keep an eye on that. Le'Veon Bell, a big one. I think Oakland and the New York Jets are really the only 2 teams that I could see making a push. I think it makes sense for the Jets. They've got the money, and he would really take a lot of pressure off of Sam Darnold and also kind of teach him to look for that check down a little bit, which is kind of an investment in the future there. And then for Oakland, they just seem ready to have a good offense next year. Pair him back with Antonio Brown and let him go to work. Wouldn't surprise me there either. And then you have Darrell Williams, who I actually didn't even know he was going to be a free agent because I thought there was no way in hell that the Panthers would let him go. I guess that's the backlash of overpaying what's his name at left tackle by, they gave him like a 5-year, $55 million deal a while ago. The former first rounder for the Vikings. I'm spacing on his name. But I thought there was no way he was going to hit the market, and he is. And I think either the Jets or the Bills or the Cardinals, so many teams should pay Darrell Williams what Trent Brown got. This dude was the best right tackle in the NFL 2 years ago, and then was hindered last year by knee injuries, but there's really no reason he can't be a plus starter at tackle, who apparently is not going to get the biggest contract. Maybe he'll pass Trent Brown. He should. But you would think Trent Brown kind of set the market getting that deal right away. So we'll see there. And then Matt Paradise is another guy you can kind of say the same thing about. A guy that has dealt with injuries over his career, but was really good last year for Denver, was a big reason that run game was good. I cannot believe Denver let him go. I don't know what their answer is as center. But I think there's going to be a huge market for Matt Paradise, who's really one of the best centers in the NFL. So again, Buffalo, New York, Denver should be in this market for Matt Paradise. He could get a ton of money, like record-breaking amounts for a center, because he's just on another level compared to a lot of these offensive linemen. And once some of these guys are gone, I think some teams are going to be like, you know what, screw it. We have so much money. Let's give him $16, $17 million, even though he's just a center. Like, he is that good. So that is going to do it, guys. Please hit that like button and really, give me your feedback on the format of this. I know it's kind of new. It's going to be a longer video. And it's kind of a podcast, but give me your feedback on this if you want to see more, if you want to see this but shorter, if you don't mind the longer versions, if you want to see this broken down into multiple episodes. We can really go anywhere with this direction, or whatever. It's been a long recording. I don't need proper English at this point. So cheers as always, guys. Appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.